Fantastic. Good afternoon, guys, and thank you for making us your choice after lunch. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the future of Australian storytelling. On our panel, we're joined by award-winning filmmakers, podcasters, and we're going to discuss what it takes to make successful long-form content. As Therese mentioned, we're going to take a look at some of the challenges that filmmakers and podcasters face. Things like funding issues, the rise of global platforms, and content quotas. And also we're going to discuss what they'd like to see to better support the industry. Now, if you found the David Ohana presentation this morning inspiring, you're in for a real treat, because we have some of the best up-and-coming independent storytellers in the country on this panel. No pressure. Right, to begin with, I want to start with you, Katrina. But you're obviously the director of How to Poison a Planet. Before we dive into a few questions, I just want to show our audience a trailer of the film.
People putting these chemicals in our environment.
From here to Australia.
PFAS chemicals have been used in so many different products over the last 70 years.
But scientists concluded that PFAS are likely to cause cancer.
It's intense, man. It's huge.
3M, the only company that made these chemicals, knew PFOS was toxic.
And getting into general population's blood.
And yet they told nobody anything.
All these kids were dying of cancer, basically on the doorstep of 3M's headquarters.
Generation after generation exposed in the name of profits.
That's the goal of our trial, to tell that story.
This story, it's playing out all over the world now.
Wreck Bay in Australia, devastation's been caused.
PFAS leached out from Defence Force bases.
All these different cancers have come to our community.
10 brothers, all problems.
We found a massive brain tumour.
Our land's been poisoned.
People need to be made accountable.
90% of 3M's PFOS was produced after they learned it was toxic, after it killed monkeys.
I can't see anything that's more important than seeing this through.
Every time you turn a stone over, you just find something new.
We're talking about worldwide contamination.
This is so incredibly evil.
Wow, I mean, I've seen this documentary 3 times, and I'm an absolute documentary fiend, and it is incredible, and it's also quite devastating. So if any of you out there have Stan, I would highly recommend you watch it. If you don't have Stan, this is a good opportunity for you to subscribe. Now, Katrina, it paints a rather devastating picture about PFAS, also known as forever chemicals, and how this has impacted the South Coast community of Wreck Bay. But what your documentary does is it shows a local issue and it goes global, and you sort of explore the impact that it's had in America. You speak to the famous lawyer Rob Bellot, who Mark Ruffalo plays in the film Dark Waters. How did you stumble across this idea?
Well, it sort of started as a lot of documentaries do, just with a sort of a random kind of idea. You speak to someone, you see something, and in this case, I was just watching the news in the morning, and I saw a story about a number of communities in Australia that were suing our Defence Force for the contamination of their land from the firefighting foam that had come off the neighbouring Defence Force bases. And some of you in here might remember or have seen all of those stories. So I reached out to the lawyer who was running those actions, and it piqued my interest. I'd never heard of firefighting foam being toxic, and it was all really new. I'd never heard of PFAS chemicals or anything, and reached out to the lawyer, and he said, well, we've started those actions and we're about to start 7 more sites around Australia, and one of them is Wreck Bay. So we went down to Wreck Bay, I went with our First Nations producer, and we spent months really going back and forth to this community, speaking to the community members. And what had happened is the Defence Force base had been using this firefighting foam over decades. It had leached down into their waterways, into their food sources, and into their drinking water, and into their bodies and their blood. And as a result, it was an incredibly sick community, and just you couldn't speak to anybody there without some sort of, horrible story. And then we connected up with the journalist, Carrie Fellner, with the Sydney Morning Herald, who's an amazing journalist, and decided to sort of tell this story together. And then from there, we looked at, well, who made the foam? And it was this company 3M, and we found that in the US, there was this major nationwide litigation going on where they were actually taking 3M to court for the contamination of drinking water in the US with the same foam that had contaminated Wreck Bay. So it sort of then became this global story, and it was a 4-year in the making journey, but we sort of got there in the end.
Yeah, okay, cool. What were some of the challenges that you had along the way in terms of not only getting the idea off the ground, but getting support, some of the production issues?
Well, initially the hardest part with most documentaries is getting it funded. We had this as an idea, and we got knocked back actually originally for development funding for this project. So it was tough, and you sort of have to kind of look at your idea and go, okay, where is it resonating, where is it not resonating, and how can we sort of evolve the idea? And it was sort of after we then connected up with Carrie and thought, well, let's take this as a cross-platform promotion that we then went to Stan, and they loved the idea, and it sort of all clicked into place. But definitely in the beginning, it was just getting it funded and getting people to believe in it, because also at that time, PFAS chemicals were largely unknown, and so I think people were going, what do you mean a chemical contaminated the world? So that was probably our initial challenge, and then obviously telling a story across Australia and the US, and not only the time difference of trying to make that work all the time, but to make those stories seamlessly weave together and to kind of be able to capture this global story in sort of 85 minutes was definitely a challenge.
Yeah, when we spoke about this before, you mentioned one of the other challenges that you actually had was that because people were so sick, sometimes you'd organise to interview them and then they would no longer be there, they'd pass away. Take us through that and how you sort of dealt with those emotions.
Yeah, Wreck Bay, like I mentioned, it was just such a sick community, and there was one period when we were filming there, I think in a 6-month period, there was about 7 or 8 funerals just in that period of time. And it was just devastating, and going down and meeting people who were really sick themselves, and unfortunately since making the film we have lost someone. It was really, really tough, and I think hard to be there and become friends with this community, but then also we were able to leave and they were still there, stuck in this contamination and in this situation. But for sure that first year, I mean, we took a long time to film because we kept sort of planning to go down, and then for whatever reason we couldn't, and often it was because there would be a funeral, they'd have sorry business for a period of time, and it was about 2 years of filming actually in that community.
Okay, and what sort of impact has the film had so far?
Well, it released on Stan last year, which was incredible, and we had a screening at the Australian Federal Parliament here, and it's since had its launch in the US. It's screened at the French Senate, which was amazing. It's screened at the Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention at an event they had recently. A number of NGOs are screening it in the US and Europe, and we're sort of hoping for more of that. So it's creating, you know, a little bit of impact here and there, and a lot of organisations are using it now to try and help push for regulation on these chemicals, because they're essentially in everyday products that we come into contact with all the time. They're in drinking water, they're everywhere, and so there's a lot of global movement to try and get on top of this, and the film's sort of finding its place in helping with some of that.
Have you seen any sort of changes locally in terms of regulation and the government response to PFAS?
It's been slow here. It's been really slow. Australia is actually quite far behind the rest of the world, and currently what we say is safe levels of these chemicals in our drinking water are significantly higher than what the US say is safe. So we need more action here for sure, and we're working on it. But Australia definitely has a lot of work to do to catch up to the rest of the world. Okay,
final question. And I'm sure the whole audience wants to know this as well. What's it like working with Mark Ruffalo, the amazing Hulk?
I mean, amazing. He honestly, the nicest guy, so lovely. And, you know, when he walked onto the set when we were filming, it was like working with, you know, with a colleague. He's so passionate about the issue. He's so genuine in his passion for it. Very generous with his time, obviously, to say yes to do an indie doco out of Australia. And he's been really supportive since the release as well. So, yeah, a little bit surreal, but he's really a really wonderful person.
Great. Right, I'd like to move on to Prison Chronicles, the podcast series by you, Sid. But before we jump into questions, can we just show a sizzle reel of what it's like?
Archie McCafferty is a Scottish-born Australian serial killer, referred to in the media as the Australian Charles Manson. The comparison to Manson was made as in 1973, the then 25-year-old McCafferty led a group of teenagers on a murderous rampage through the western suburbs of Sydney, killing 3 unsuspecting victims in cold blood. At his trial in 1974, McCafferty claimed that his dead son had spoken to him from the grave, instructing him to kill 7 people. He was sentenced to 3 life terms, but told the court being sent to prison would not stop him from achieving his goal. He needed 4 more victims, and now, for the rest of his life, he's the prison system's problem.
Right. Now, Sid, you are a former prison guard. Was it Longreach where you were at?
Long Bay.
Long Bay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Got that confused. But anyways, what inspired you to do this podcast? Because I understand you have a history of doing sports-related podcasts.
Yeah, so anytime anyone finds out that I was a prison officer, it's the same bunch of questions. Everyone's fascinated. Nobody, touch wood, nobody here will end up in jail, so you don't know what it's like. So they've always got 1,000 questions. So I was doing a comedy sports podcast. We were one of the earliest ones doing that kind of content. So I did that for about 11 years. And I thought instead of writing a book of all these stories, I thought the best way to get to the biggest audience was to get prison officers to tell their story and put it out as a podcast, which is not an easy thing to do. Prison officers don't generally talk, they don't trust the media, but I was able to get hold of a lot of people. I've interviewed dozens of them, and they've all got 1 million stories, and that's how it first came about.
And what's one of the stories that really sticks with you?
Well, that Archie McCafferty, he had to have 4 more victims. So when he went to jail, he killed another prisoner, and an officer that I spoke to, because he's doing life, they have to keep the inmates busy, so they were giving him wood workshops, teaching him how to do wood.
Build stuff.
Yeah, and somehow gave him a chisel, which is not a great idea. So an officer teaching him woodwork ended up with a chisel up under his ribs. You'll have to subscribe to hear how that one went. But my favourite story, it actually happened to me. I'm not sure if people know the granny killer, John Wayne Glover. He was called the granny killer because when he would come across an elderly woman, didn't matter where he was or what happened, he just went into a fit of rage and killed several victims. So we had him in jail, we had him up at Prince of Wales Hospital, and I was tasked with bringing him back to Long Bay after his treatment. And we get in the lift, there's me, my offsider, and the granny killer. And we go down a couple of floors and the doors open, which you don't really want members of the public when you've got an inmate. And so I'm hitting closed door. And just as the doors are about to shut, this arm goes through and they reopen. And it's an elderly lady standing there and screaming at me, saying she's going to report me, she knows where I work, carrying on. And then she said, "Come on, girls." And 3 of her friends jumped in with her into the lift. So I'm in the lift with the granny killer and 4 grannies. And I'm thinking, this can't be real. Like, it was absolute madness. And that was his modus operandi. When he got agitated by elderly women, he would attack them and kill them. And
in lifts.
This is what I was faced with, and he was agitated. He was shaking and sweating, and yeah, you have to tune in to hear that one in as well.
I understand that you have quite an interesting production process, and you do all of the sound effects yourself. Can you take us through some of that?
Yeah, I do everything. I write, interview, I chase people up, and all the sound effects, because the jail has a certain way, and I wanted it for the listener to feel like they're there, and just stock standard sound effects weren't cutting it, so I've dragged my poor wife to Dubbo Jail, Cooma Jail, Maitland, Parramatta, all the ones that are closed down, and I've got an old Jackson lock and key, and we would unlock and lock and shut cell doors, and
incredible.
I got her with a mic as I jumped off a little retaining wall in my backyard for a crime escaping. So all of it.
Your wife must love you.
Oh, she loves it. We're going away for a weekend to Dubbo Jail. She loves it.
Fantastic. Now, Poppy, you founded Curious Media. I mean, you've got a decorated career as a music and culture journalist. You're editor-chief of Rolling Stone. What led you to create Curious Media?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very lucky when I was at the Bragg Media to have multiple podcasts within it. I hosted 3, one for Rolling Stone, one for Variety, one for the Music Network. And I just loved that intimacy that it created when you get to sit with a person and delve into their story or their art piece and just give so much context. And I just think that long-form storytelling, especially from a video point of view, was so interesting to me, and then it resonated a lot with fans as well. And then I found it was so interesting that, you know, I was working with these iconic mastheads, but what was really connecting with fans and actually with brands who were investing in it was the personalities involved. And so I was like, this is where storytelling is at. And so I was very lucky to find a like-minded man in Steve Grace, my co-founder. And we were like, it's video storytelling. We want to be where media is. I always want to be where media is, and that's where it is now. And it's been extremely validating to go through that process and see brands' investment and involvement. And I get to work with amazing creators like Sid. Sid is one of our curious creators, as we call them. And honestly, discovering Sid's podcast was completely by fluke. I would love to say that, you know, I delved into the data and I found that it was amazing. Although you did get like 20,000 streams in 2 weeks, so that was pretty amazing.
That helps.
But no, I was like, this is definitely a person who is so wanting listeners to walk towards the uncomfortable, which is, you know, the tagline that we have at Curious Media. And I'm so lucky to work with him and so many other incredible creators.
Okay, fantastic. Some questions for the panel now. At a time when there's so many different channels, there's so many different streamers, how do you get audience attention with long-form storytelling, especially when you consider the fact that our attention spans are actually getting shorter? Who wants to kick off? Katrina?
Well, I think with documentary, from our perspective, when you come up with an idea, you think, would I watch that? Is that something I would want to sit through? Or is there an audience that would really want to watch that? I know with documentary, there's still really incredible stories that people are really engaging with. Sports docs, music docs. Everyone loves a great music doc. True crime's really big. Corporate cover-up or things like that. There's themes and there's topics and there's all kinds of documentaries that people will connect with. So I think it's finding the things that break through. I mean, having some celebrity power can help as well. But I think when people really want to engage with your story, you'll commit for the long haul. You're not going to watch 10 minutes of it. You're going to be in. And I think that also comes down to crafting it and making sure you keep people interested and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's about kind of finding something and finding your audience and making sure you're making it for that audience.
Okay, when you're sort of going through the creative process and bringing it to life, do you do certain things to make sure that it sticks with an audience?
Yeah, I guess we work with incredible editors. My colleague who I work with, Janine's an incredible filmmaker. We workshop ideas, we workshop structure, we look at, you know, how can we use music, how can we use graphics, how do you kind of create the tension, then let it release for a while and then bring them back. So it's all in the process of putting something together that kind of brings it to life and hopefully gets people to be gripped from the beginning and stick with it.
What are your thoughts, Sid? What do you find sticks?
So with the true crime, a lot of the true crime that's out there, which is extremely popular, but they follow a case through the background, the court case, and then when they get convicted and go to jail, that's most true crime, but that's kind of where my story starts. So I think the content is important from getting them interested, and then all the different topics that I cover. There's a lot of explaining so that people can put these stories in context, but making it interesting while I'm explaining things and intertwining stories and the sound effects of me jumping off my retaining wall, just to keep their interest all the way along.
Okay.
And one of the criticisms is that there's not enough episodes straight away, which is fantastic feedback for me.
Fantastic. I want to move on to funding. Tell us a little bit about funding in podcasting, Poppy, and how confident are you that your business will be successful?
Yeah, I think it's obviously notoriously been hard to commercialise podcasts until now. Like, I really think that that's changing. I was reading some stats as I was preparing for this, and I saw that the podcast industry globally is worth over $4 billion, and they're expecting it to reach $5 billion by 2027, and that there's a growth of over 30% in advertising budget into podcasting in Australia alone. And then I don't know if you saw the other day how the Golden Globes have added a new category, Best Podcast, for next year, which is super validating. I think there's so much money there. They're thinking that the global market for podcasts will be $600 million by next year. So there's this huge pool of audience there for brands to tap into. I do think that Australia is a little bit behind America when it comes to that advertising spend in podcasting, and we're playing a bit of catch up.
Okay. Katrina, what about in terms of filmmaking? I read a stat the other day, I think it was a report by the government, that investment in film and TV dramas in Australia was down 30% or something. How difficult is it to secure funding? And especially at a time when you've got global platforms coming in, they don't have content quotas.
It's really difficult. There's so many incredible filmmakers and incredible stories and a huge amount of talent, and only these small slots that you're all kind of trying to get your project on. Stan, ABC and SBS are fantastic. They're commissioning local content, but at the moment all of the global streamers, Netflix, Amazon, Disney, they have a huge presence here. I mean, probably everyone here has at least a subscription to one of those. I know I do. But they have no obligation to invest back into Australia. And so one thing that the industry is really pushing for at the moment is to implement content quotas. So if they are going to be, have this presence in Australia and we're going to be paying our subscriptions, they should be then commissioning 20% back into Australian production. So that would just increase the amount of opportunities for filmmakers and increase the amount of stories that get told, and the amount of stories that get told then globally, which is what we want.
Yeah, because they have content quotas, and the commercial broadcasters are bound by them. Any broadcaster in Australia is actually bound by content quotas. Yeah. So you're endorsing something similar across all streamers?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that that's crucial to sort of saving the industry at the moment. It's really tough. It's a really tough time, and that's the main thing I think that the industry is really pushing for, is those content quotas, which hopefully are going to come into play in the next few years, but we'll see.
Well, what do those global streamers look for in terms of success? I mean, I watched a TV series on Netflix called Territory, which recently, the second season got cancelled. And that was a lovely Australian drama. What is the secret of success when it comes to pitching to these global streamers?
I mean, I guess from a streamer's perspective, it's clicks, it's how many people are watching it and how many people are watching it all the way through. If it's a series, are they watching all the way to the end? And that's what they look for. We're not privy to the numbers. We never know necessarily how many clicks they want and how big an audience they want. But that would be, I guess, how they measure their success. But there's a number of ways to measure success with films, documentaries and dramas, and the impact that they have is another way. But for a streamer, I would imagine that's their biggest target.
Sid, what about you when you're looking to commercialise your podcast? What are sort of the challenges that you face, and what are some of the things you'd like to see the industry do to better support independent creators like yourself?
It's interesting because with podcasting, that's the whole beauty of it, that people have a story to tell, and these platforms make it easy for independent people to tell their stories and reach a big audience, but monetising that has its challenges, and I think it would put a lot of people off from trying to put out their stories. I'm sure there's a lot of stories that don't get made because it's difficult to fund, but that's why I've got Poppy on board.
It's my job.
That's your job.
and how are you going to make that happen, Poppy? What do you think brands and media agencies are looking for to throw money at podcasts?
With Curious Media, we have this tagline, walk towards the uncomfortable, and we're asking our viewers and our listeners to do that, but we're also asking brands to do that. We've been around just over a month. We are a very brand new podcast network, absolutely still finding our way, probably going to make a million mistakes and learn from them. But it has been really validating. We've had a couple of health companies come on board, tech company, a theatre company come on board already. We're going to do an event for Sid's, I don't know if you want to talk about your next podcast, oh my God. He's doing a whole series, which is fascinating. I don't think there's time though. And a live series with that. So there's definitely incredible ways for brands to come on board, but I do understand that there's so many of those holding companies that have their budgets set in certain spots. I just think they need to look at that global audience of 600 million that they can tap into, and tap into the younger audience too. I think podcasting is a great space for you to tap into Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They're all over TikTok. Every podcast goes to every single platform. Of course, we do like social snippets and have a whole social strategy as well. So I think the eyeballs are there. They just need to take that chance.
Yeah, there you go, guys. Sid, he's your man if you're looking for a podcaster back. Katrina, just a quick one in terms of the funding issue. Are there any sort of creative ways that you approach funding these days, given that it's so tough to get it?
Well, I guess you have to really scrutinise your idea before you even try and pitch it out there, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. Anyone here that's in documentary or drama or even in podcasting, you know that it's so much work before you even get to the table to present it somewhere. So, and I think, you know, having a trailer, trying to, you know, have a creative and really gripping treatment, all those things come into play when you're trying to pitch out a story. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's definitely hard. But you like I said with How to Poison the Planet, we got knocked back and we just kept on going. So you just got to believe in it.
Just a quick random question: Trump tariffs on film, 100%. How is that going to impact you and the Australian industry?
I don't know how Trump's tariffs are going to impact a lot of things, but I think it's disappointing from an Australian filmmaking perspective because so many huge movies are shot here. You know, Mad Max was shot here. There's been so many big films, and there's a lot still happening now here, and it creates a lot of jobs for our incredible industry here, for editors, for cinematographers, for art departments, everybody, you know, and it's a huge, huge income stream. So I know Trump's trying to say that he should be making everything in the US, but I hope that the finer details of that won't hinder that, because there's an incredible industry here, and a lot of really, really amazing Hollywood films get filmed here. So we want to see that continuing. So but we'll see what happens with that.
Fantastic. Look, I'd like to end on a slightly optimistic note, and I'm going to ask all three of you this question. Sid, what do you think is the future of Australian storytelling?
Well, I think it's important that we have Australian stories. My content in particular is very Australian. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of episodes that are in the Australian vernacular, phrases, and so it's important these stories get told. And I just think business needs to just take a punt on some of these independents and get these important Australian stories out there.
Poppy?
Yeah, I think business needs to take a punt. I think we're seeing a lot of that, especially over in the US. But I think because the consumers are already there, the fans are already within that. Like, yeah, it's becoming just essentially in the zeitgeist. And I think what I've seen in media, especially across most of the big companies that I know, is that fans are so obsessed with the personalities tied to them, not so much the institutions. And I think we're just going to see a growth of that. I love the fact that, you know, it wasn't too long ago where our idols were, you know, singers or someone from the creative sector, and now it's, you know, we have celebrities who are podcast hosts or are content creators making a podcast about prison from their home studio, where they also keep their 21 guitars.
Yeah, I do.
I just think that's wonderful. I think that the future of storytelling is more investing in personalities.
Okay, Katrina, you've got the final word. Future of Australian storytelling.
I think the future of Australian storytelling is worth us saving and fighting for and engaging with. I think if you go home tonight or next week and go, I'm going to watch something Australian, that would be awesome, because everything made here is amazing, and we've got to back it, we've got to support it and get behind it so that it can continue to grow and continue to flourish and continue to create amazing content, and we can be really proud of it.
Fantastic. Katrina, Poppy and Sid, thank you so much, and thank you for joining the Cairns Crocodiles.
Thank you, Arvind.
Thank you.